Most people think millionaires are built in exciting industries. They imagine software founders, flashy consumer brands, glamorous startups, viral products, venture-backed rockets, men in black turtlenecks promising to reinvent some ordinary corner of life that nobody was complaining about in the first place. I have lived too long to trust glamour. Glamour is expensive. Glamour attracts competition, envy, foolish capital, impatient expectations, and an endless number of people who want the same outcome without having any special discipline to deserve it. When I look back over the people I have seen quietly become rich, I do not mostly remember glamour. I remember repetition. I remember plain, useful, necessary little systems that took money from customers in small, low-drama chunks month after month while everyone else was still chasing the next big leap. That is how a great deal of real wealth is built, not through applause, through boring cash flow. Boring is one of the most underrated words in all of finance. People use it as though it were an insult. I often use it as praise. A boring business is frequently a business with stable demand, tolerable complexity, understandable costs, repeat customers, and a lower chance that some clever 27-year-old will appear tomorrow and wipe you out with a prettier pitch deck. That matters a lot. I have always preferred businesses that do not require the world to remain fascinated by them in order to remain useful. There is a simple reason: fascination fades. Dirty clothes do not stop existing. Stored junk does not suddenly become emotionally easier to throw away. Cars do not stop getting dirty. Roaches do not stop entering kitchens because inflation is high. Tenants do not begin managing themselves because the stock market had a good quarter. That is what I mean by boring demand that survives moods. The problem is that most people do not learn to see opportunity that way. They are trained to admire scale before cash flow, novelty before reliability, and story before structure. So they start with whatever looks modern. They try drop shipping, they try a niche clothing brand, they try crypto because the chart looks like a shortcut. And a shortcut is always emotionally attractive to the person who feels behind. They try some complicated funnel, some algorithmic trick, some angle that sounds brilliant at dinner and produces almost nothing at the bank. Then they conclude that business ownership itself is unreliable. Very often it was not business ownership that failed them. It was their addiction to excitement. I want to explain this through a man like many men I have seen. I will call him Harry, not because his name matters, because his pattern does. At 32, Harry was an operations coordinator in a logistics company. He was not starving. He was not lazy. He was not one of those men who spend their whole lives waiting for somebody richer to rescue them. He worked, he showed up, he took home a little more than $3,400 a month after tax. The public would look at that and say he was doing fine. The public says that too easily. Fine is one of the most dangerous words in personal finance because it allows a person to remain stuck inside a life that is not actually improving much. Harry's balance sheet was unimpressive in the ordinary modern way. A paid-off hatchback, less than $1,000 in savings, no real asset base, no compounding machine, no serious margin. He had already made the usual modern mistakes. He had tried the exciting roads, a drop-shipping store that looked good in screenshots and barely made enough profit to pay for dinner, a crypto phase that taught him volatility far more thoroughly than it taught him wealth, a clothing brand that left him with unsold hoodies, and the sort of shame that comes from having to admit that your inventory is now taking up hallway space instead of producing cash. All of these efforts had one thing in common: uncertain demand, complicated execution, no predictable monthly cash. That last one is what matters. I have always believed that the difference between a hobby with invoices and a real business often comes down to the quality of cash flow. Does money arrive in a pattern you can understand, forecast, and improve? Or does it arrive only when the moon, the algorithm, the trend, the crowd, and your own energy all happen to align? If it is the second kind, you may be talented and still remain poor. One night, on a bus ride home, Harry ran into an idea that changed the direction of his life. Not because it was mysterious, because it was embarrassingly plain. He read a summary of The Millionaire Next Door and came across a truth I have seen confirmed in different clothing for years. Many real millionaires are not public personalities, not celebrities of finance, not people with attention businesses or glamorous startups. They are self-employed owners of dull, normal operations. Repair businesses, local service businesses, property-related businesses, distribution routes, small operations people use without needing to be persuaded through high drama each time. That sentence hit Harry hard because it offended almost everything he had been taught to admire. He had been chasing cleverness. Here was a much more serious proposition: Stop trying to look clever and start trying to own something necessary. That distinction is one of the great dividing lines in business. The market for looking clever is crowded. The market for quietly owning necessity is much better. Harry treated that thought not as inspiration but as an assignment. That is another thing I admire. People who treat good ideas as decorations rarely change. People who treat them as work orders sometimes do. So he spent the next year studying small businesses for sale in his area, reading operator communities, watching what categories kept appearing in real stories of durable wealth, and asking a better question than he had asked before. Not what could go viral. Not what could impress his friends. Not what had the highest theoretical upside if everything went well. What sort of boring business keeps getting paid month after month even when nobody is especially excited? That question led him to 6 categories: laundromats, vending routes, self-storage, simple car washes, pest control, and related route businesses like lawn and pool maintenance, property management. If you look at those businesses for the first time with modern eyes, they may seem too ordinary to be rich-making machines. That is part of their strength. Ordinary keeps many foolish competitors away because most people do not want wealth badly enough to choose repetition over attention. They want both. Very often they get neither. The first business Harry seriously examined was a laundromat. He almost dismissed it immediately. Most people would. They hear laundromat and think of old fluorescent lights, folding tables, detergent smell, and low-status work. That is exactly the kind of snobbery that blinds people to the economics underneath a thing. I have never cared much about the social prestige of a business. I care about what customers have to do and how often they have to do it. In dense rental areas, people still need clean clothes every week. Many do not have in-unit machines. Even families who do sometimes use laundromats for large items or overflow loads. The point is not the romance. The point is the habit. Dirty clothes recur. A recurring need with modest transaction drama is a beautiful thing. Harry found an aging laundromat about 15 minutes from where he lived. The owner was tired, older, and ready to leave. That too is common in these categories. A great many boring fortunes are built not by inventing a business, but by buying a slightly neglected one from someone who wants out. The place looked dated. That did not bother Harry anymore. He was finally learning to separate cosmetics from economics. The unit generated steady revenue and netted around what a modest local machine should if run competently. Harry did not have enough cash to buy it outright. That is another point worth pausing on. Ordinary people often assume that ownership is available only to those already rich. Not true. Ownership is often available to the person with enough seriousness to structure a deal, enough discipline to save a down payment, and enough willingness to operate something unglamorous after the papers are signed. Harry scraped together the down payment. He sold the better car and drove something cheaper. He used a modest line of credit. The seller financed the rest across years in exchange for a fast transfer and continuity. Again, boring again, excellent. Month 1 was not cinematic. The business produced a little over $1,300 for Harry after expenses and debt service. That number did not make him rich. It did something more important. It broke the spell. For the first time he had cash coming in that did not depend on more hours at the logistics desk. That matters psychologically more than most people realize. A great many people remain trapped, not because they lack income, but because every dollar of income is chained to their body and time. The first dollar that arrives without punching a clock is a philosophical event. It changes the way the owner looks at the rest of his life. That first laundromat dollar was not mainly money. It was proof. By month 6, after modest operational improvements like adding card readers, making small price adjustments, and creating a simple family pass that made repeat use easier, the monthly cash flow rose to a little above $2,000. Still not glamorous. Wonderful. Glamour was what had been fooling him. $2,000 a month from machines washing other people. Clothes is the kind of sentence people laugh at when they are young and envy when they are older. That is how real life usually works. The second business came from paying attention rather than fantasizing. While operating the laundromat, Harry noticed something obvious once he stopped insisting that only big ideas matter. The snack machine did steady business. People waiting for laundry bought chips, drinks, and small conveniences without much internal debate. That is another beautiful pattern. Small decision, small ticket, repeated habit, captive audience. So he bought a machine from a retiring operator and placed it at the laundromat. Then a few more in sensible locations, a warehouse, an office lobby, a repair shop. Vending is one of those businesses the sophisticated person likes to dismiss until he sees the actual cash behavior. Yes, it is repetitive. Yes, you refill, route, collect, adjust products, and think about placement. Exactly. Repetition with demand is what we want. A vending route is not thrilling. It is a low-drama monetization of human habit that can be remarkably profitable if done without laziness. By the first year, after moving one underperforming machine and refining what products sold in each site, Harry's route produced a couple $1,000s a month in profit. Now the laundromat and the vending route were feeding each other. One generated traffic, the other monetized waiting. This is another lesson most people miss. Once you stop chasing disconnected fantasies, your businesses can begin helping each other. That is where small empires quietly begin. By then, his side income was already outgrowing what most people would still call a side activity. It was moving toward the point where the total from boring assets rivaled the salary from the respectable job. That is a dangerous and beautiful moment. Dangerous because the owner gets excited and may become careless. Beautiful because he begins seeing that his freedom problem is no longer theoretical. The third business was storage. This one frightened Harry because the scale was larger. Good, a man should feel some appropriate discomfort when the numbers rise. But he had learned something from the laundromat and vending route. He no longer needed a viral narrative. He needed a durable pattern. Self-storage runs on one of the oldest and funniest patterns in human life. People do not like throwing things away. They tell themselves they will clear out the unit next month. Next month becomes a year. The unit becomes another quiet monthly habit. That is exactly the kind of low-drama recurring behavior an owner should find interesting. Harry did not buy a giant facility outright. He partnered with a contractor who had land and construction ability but no interest in operations. Harry contributed capital and operating discipline. The contractor contributed the site and the build. This is another thing ordinary people ignore. You do not always need to possess every ingredient yourself. Sometimes wealth comes from arranging complementary strengths rather than heroically doing everything alone. That is much closer to how mature capital actually behaves. The storage units filled gradually, not explosively. Again, wonderful explosive growth in finance often means either an extraordinary business or an extraordinary misunderstanding. The distinction is not always obvious in the moment. Storage gave him another source of recurring payments tied to a simple truth about human behavior. People keep paying for friction avoidance. They pay because moving, sorting, discarding, and confronting clutter takes psychic energy. That energy is often more expensive to them than the monthly fee. The business owner does not need to moralize about it. He needs only to price, manage, and occupy units intelligently. By the time storage stabilized, Harry's total monthly cash flow from the three businesses had crossed his day. Job income that was not the result of genius, it was the result of stacking boring. That phrase is much more useful than most people realize. The public keeps looking for one giant breakthrough. In reality, many fortunes are built from several modest machines that become meaningful when layered together. A laundromat by itself may not sound transformational. A vending route by itself may not sound transformational. A partial stake in a small storage build may not sound transformational. Stacked together, they can absolutely change the owner's life. That is how the arithmetic works. The public loves singular heroic stories because singular stories are easier to market. Capital often loves layering. At that point, Harry finally understood the deeper lesson. The category mattered less than the pattern. That is what serious people eventually learn. The visible business type is often secondary. What matters is the structure underneath. When he finished his study of boring millionaires, he realized the 6 business types that kept recurring were all manifestations of the same deeper 3 filters. That is the heart of the whole matter. The first filter was recurring payment without high chase cost. Customers pay at least monthly, or with enough frequency and habit that the owner's revenue stream behaves like monthly cash flow in aggregate laundry, storage, route businesses, property management, pest control, even vending in the right locations. The second filter was low. Drama customer decisions. No family summit over a snack purchase. No 10-hour internal debate over a wash cycle. No philosophical anguish over paying to keep furniture in a storage unit. One more month. No great emotional ritual before a pest treatment visit. The smaller the decision drama, the more stable the cash behavior tends to be. That matters immensely. The third filter was control over the asset underneath the cash flow. Machines, routes, units, land, bays, customer relationships, management agreements, something tangible or contract. like that can one day be sold, financed, improved, and defended. That is what moves a person from hustling to owning. He is not only receiving payments, he is gradually controlling an asset base beneath the payments. That is where wealth begins to stop feeling temporary. By 38, Harry's net worth had crossed the $1 million line. That sentence sounds flashy when delivered quickly. In reality, it was incredibly unflashy. That is exactly why I like it. The laundromat was worth real money, the storage interest had meaningful value, the vending route had market value too. He had retained earnings, built a simple home base, and invested surplus into broad index funds instead of trying to become a financial celebrity after his first real success. That too matters. A great many people make one decent move, then lose the gains because success awakens the worst part of their personality. Harry did not become stylish. He became more boring. That was the correct response. When people looked at him, they did not see some media-ready entrepreneur. They saw a practical man in practical clothes, still driving something sensible. People call that luck later because they only see the account values. They do not see the night spent learning machines, routes, software, pricing, tenant psychology, and maintenance instead of chasing the next glittering distraction. The public always notices the outcome and almost never the boredom that made the outcome possible. Now, what should an ordinary person do with all this? Not everyone will buy a laundromat. Not everyone should. Not everyone lives in the right geography for storage. Not everyone has the stomach for root businesses. That is fine. The point is not imitation at the level of category. The point is imitation at the level of structure. Choose one boring business type in your area that already passes the 3 filters. Study it patiently, not for a weekend. Long enough to stop being romantic about it, drive around, look for neglected operators, read sale listings, ask what customers actually do, not what you wish they did. Ask whether the payment behavior is recurring. Ask whether the customer's decision is low drama. Ask whether you can eventually own or control the real asset underneath the stream. If the answers keep coming back, yes, you are likely near something useful. Another thing I would tell the ordinary person is not to underestimate tiny cash flow. The first $1,300 a month did not make Harry rich. It changed his direction. That is more important. A lot of people insult small cash flow because they are still thinking like employees. They compare everything to salary. That is natural in the beginning. Then they miss what matters. The first independent dollars are not precious because of their size. They are precious because of their source. They prove money can arrive without another hour of your personal labor. Once that proof enters a person's mind, all of his later decisions can change. That is why small cash flow should be respected, protected, and stacked. I would also warn people that boring is a filter on the owner, not only on the business. Can you handle repetition? Can you stand tracking a machine route, a wash count, a pest route, a set of storage vacancies, a rent collection schedule, or maintenance issues without needing emotional novelty every afternoon? A great many people cannot. That is fine. They should know it. But if you can stand repetition, if you can operate a simple dashboard for years without demanding that the business entertain you, you already possess one of the rarest competitive advantages in modern life. Most people are distracted out of wealth. They are not incapable of it. They are merely too seduced by novelty to remain in front of one useful machine long enough for it to pay them properly. That is why boring works. Boring is a moat against the attention-starved crowd. Let me say one more thing because it matters deeply. This is not about worshiping small business ownership in the abstract. Plenty of small businesses are miserable. Plenty destroy their owners. A restaurant can consume a life. A boutique retail concept can swallow capital endlessly. A trendy startup can produce status and no cash. I am not praising entrepreneurship as theater. I am praising certain business patterns, monthly recurring or habit-driven cash, low decision drama, control of the underlying asset. That is where boring becomes beautiful. Most people want to skip directly to meaning. I prefer to begin with economics. Economics, handled correctly, often creates the sort of freedom that later allows more meaning. The world reverses the order and gets many young people into trouble. They ask what feels exciting. I ask what survives. They ask what scales virally. I ask what keeps getting paid. They ask what sounds impressive. I ask what is hard to displace once the owner is competent. Those are not the same questions. The second set makes richer people. By the time Harry looked up and saw that his net worth had passed a number he once regarded as belonging to some other species, the essential work was already behind him. He had become the kind of person who could own boring well. That is the true change. Money comes later, the owner changes first. He stops needing glamour, he stops confusing noise with opportunity. He stops searching for the next big thing and starts respecting the next repeated thing. That is a far more durable mental model. So if you are starting from very little, if you feel tired of unstable side hustles, tired of trends, tired of pretending that uncertainty is the same thing as upside, take that seriously. It may be the beginning of wisdom. You do not need a brilliant idea. You may need a boring one. You may need one service people use without deep thought. One machine that works even when no one is applauding. One route, one row of units, one modest management agreement, one operation old enough that everyone else has overlooked it, and stable enough that it keeps converting ordinary human behavior into monthly cash. Then, if you have any sense, you stack another and another, not because you are chasing scale for vanity, because stacking boring is how the small numbers become large enough to matter. That is the secret people keep trying to replace with something more glamorous. I would not replace it, I would build on it. And if you do it long enough, one day the world will use the same lazy word it always uses for people who quietly did the right things for years. Lucky let them. The laundromat does not care what they call you. The vending route does not care either. The storage units will go on collecting rent from people's refusal to clean out their lives. The pest route will keep returning. The tenants will keep needing management. The car wash bays will keep filling when the weather and dust insist. That is the beauty of boring. It does not need admiration. It only needs operation. And in the long run, operation is what makes money, not applause, never applause. If you understand that, while most people still do not, you will already be much closer to wealth than the crowd chasing the next dramatic promise. That is the point. Boring is not the insult. Boring is the edge.